All right, we'll get started. So thanks everyone for joining this webinar on monetizing media. My name is Bharat Walia. I'm go-to-market strategist here, both at the Tango Code and Chassis brand. And in a moment, I will be introducing our speakers for the day. Prior to doing that, just wanted to call out a couple of things. If you have joined, you will notice that you may not be able to put anything in the chat. However, we have the Q&A component turned on. So whenever you have any questions, feel free to pop those into the Q&A section and we will take them at the end. I've got some Q&A also prepped that I had some questions as well, but we'll get to the guest audience questions first. So quick background on Tango Code and Chassis. Tango Code is a company that has been working on building digital marketing software automation for the past 10 years. And Chassis is our other brand that we started a couple of years ago. It's an automation engine that allows you to build ads at scale, as well as automation on the budget side, both from a perspective of pacing budgets, but also budget optimization. We're heavily focused in increasing efficiency and scale for organizations of all different kinds, from agencies to media service providers, which is what this is going to be more relevant for, and the whole gamut. So with that, given that we have this hour, we will have, again, Q&A the last 10 to 15 minutes. It's my distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Alex Holt, who is our current Chief Strategy Officer who just recently joined, bringing 10 plus years of MarTech and activation experience to the team. Most recently, prior to joining, Alex served as the VP of Audience Strategy and Activation at Cars Commerce. You guys might know them better as Cars.com, overseeing a broad team across MarTech, analytics, owned and paid media, and ad operations. And Alex has launched and scaled several media products to multi-million-dollar scale. And so we're really excited that he'll be able to share some of his insights. And hopefully you'll find those very, very helpful and useful. We will be sharing a copy of this deck. So in case you are planning to jot notes, don't worry about it. And there's a good chance we should be able to process the video and share that as well with you shortly thereafter. And then we will have Veronica Buitron join, our co-founder and CEO, who's also the product owner of Chassis. And Veronica has been in this industry for over 10 years as well, and she's worked on a lot of modular automation platforms, originally commissioned by Google in 2019 and Meta. And so she'll be joining in the second half. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to get rolling.
Hey, everybody. Again, Alex Holt, Chief Strategy Officer of Chassis. Bharat, thanks for the intro. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all today about how to build and scale ad products and some of the best practices that I've learned over the past 10 years. Most of this deck, again, comes from the place of what did I wish I knew when I was trying to launch media products, in the past 10 years, and what are some of the gotchas, what are some of the wins that you can achieve, and sort of hopefully some things that will be valuable. And if you're joining and you're not from an enterprise that might be looking at scaling a national media product, please see this as, take this as bits and pieces, right? There are things in here that are applicable to anybody who's running media or thinking about how to automate and scale their own ad practices. So there are pieces of this that may not be applicable to everybody, but there are pieces of this that will. So hopefully you get something out of it, and we'll jump in. So for an agenda, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview about sort of why are we talking about media products and what is a media product. I'll talk a little bit about how to define a strategy and some things to think about as you're scoping or coming up with ideas for a media product. Talk a little bit about assembling the right team and how to plan a project around launching something like this, and then how to build media for scale. So why we're talking about this, and I guess before I get started, how do I define a media product? Right, a media product or an ad product, I use those terms interchangeably. I like media product better because it speaks to the variety of things you could launch. It's not always advertising. You can launch influencer or organic strategies that are useful. But in this context, I'm mostly talking about advertising products that are packaged execution, so a predefined set of parameters that delineate an actual product as opposed to an agency service that is running media at the request of the client and sort of beholden to the requests and the parameters that the client sets. This is an internally defined packaged product that runs based on advertising and offered as a managed service. So something that an enterprise is managing, packaging, and selling as a point solution to their end customer. These products use a predetermined combination of activation, meaning how you execute the media, and targeting, meaning who are you serving the media to achieve and measure a specific outcome or a specific KPI for the advertiser. So that's how I define a media product. Hopefully that's helpful. And why I'm talking about this, or why I think this is a relevant conversation, really comes from the world of retail media networks. If you're not familiar with retail media networks, a retail media network would be something like Walmart, and there's tons of these: Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Dollar General, Albertsons, Kroger. This whole revolution really started with retail, where these companies realized that they had a huge amount of data that their partners, so using Best Buy as an example, Best Buy has a lot more data about shopping and transactions and people than Samsung could ever have. You're not going to go to Samsung.com to buy a TV, right? You're going to go to Best Buy, or you're going to go to Walmart, or you're going to go to Target. So they realized that they had this huge amount of data that their partners didn't have. And they also had incredibly nuanced and scaled marketing teams that knew how to do advertising probably better than their partners did. And then they also had on the back end transaction data. They know what these people are buying. So they have visibility in a way that their partners didn't into the low funnel metric that they cared about. And they said, okay, what if we package our audience, our media, and our measurement together and offer that as a point solution managed service to a company from Best Buy like Samsung? Media networks really represented the first motion away in about 10 years, I would say, from brands really wanting to own all of their advertising. You know, over the past 15 or 20 years, the motion in the digital industry has been very much around, if you own all of your media and you can see everything and you're managing it yourself in a 100% transparent way, you're going to be able to basically be more efficient than handing it off to a managed service that may seem a bit like a black box. So really, managed services have not been a huge component of advertiser budgets in a long time. But with the rise of the retail media network, that shifted. People started to begin to be willing to buy media products, especially as cookies went away, and Safari and Firefox and Google just rolled that back. But most cookies are going away. Audience targeting is getting harder. This sort of retargeting efficiency that a lot of people were getting started to get a lot less efficient. And so people are having to chase audience more and more. And so these advertisers went to these retail media networks and began spending in massive volumes. You know, the industry right now represents about 20% of global retail ad spend. And the size of the total industry in the US for managed media products via retail media networks. Today, it's about $46 billion, and it's projected to rise to over $100 billion in the next few years. So the motion is that people are now willing to buy, in a way they weren't before, pre-packaged managed service products from their partners. And so the huge motion here has been in retail, but other companies have been doing media products for a long time. This is not a new concept, but it's just become a lot more relevant as retail media has become such a big force in the ad industry. In non-retail, right, which most companies are not retailers, there is still a huge opportunity to use this model. Expedia is a great example. I had a chance to work very closely with the person who was responsible for founding and growing Expedia's media business. And they've achieved over $1 billion in revenue historically from managed media products. Obviously, Expedia, right? Travel hits, it gets a huge hit during COVID. So you see in 2020 on this chart, their revenue drops, but then it starts growing again, and they're back close to that $1 billion mark. So there's huge opportunities in industries like telecom, hospitality, automotive, financial services. All sorts of industries and companies are looking at this retail media network model and asking themselves, how can I do something like that in my industry? How can I monetize my unique competitive advantage in my space, and how can I launch products that are uniquely valuable as managed services to my customers, right? So the concept here when we think about media products is that, great artists steal. How can we use the framework of a retail media network to launch a product that will end up making us a good amount of money? And usually the ways that these retail media networks operate is based on a few core principles, right? One is unique and tailored audience targeting strategy. So if you have some sort of audience data that is valuable that other people don't have, how can you work with that? Innovative activation, are there ways that you buy media that are unique or interesting or powerful, more so than other people in your space? Do you have the ability to rigorously manage that execution at scale, right? Because as you start to build this product and get tens, hundreds, thousands of customers, right, that becomes really important in launching a repeatable and valuable product. And then measurement and attribution, right? What do you have to prove that you drove the KPI that you said you were going to when somebody spent $5 or $10 or $20,000 on your product, right? So if you follow these guidelines, you can apply them to any industry and you can develop a media product that is attractive to your customer. So how do you define your strategy, right? If you're looking at those core components, how do you start thinking about this? And most people, I would say, start too far down the process. People start with something like, oh my God, we could make a ton of money doing this. How do we get that money? My experience is if you start with that, you're going to lose because you're going to not start with what's really important, which is leading with value. Advertisers are incredibly scrutinous of their budgets, right? They don't have to spend money with you. And if you spin up a media product just based on the idea that you could make money, you're going to ignore the proof point of value. So before anything else, lead with value. One of the biggest drivers of churn in retail media is lack of transparency around measurement. That's where they're losing. And that's why people are publishing articles left and right about, does retail media work? Because they started with the concept, right? We've got the shoppers, we've got the marketing, we've got the measurement. This makes sense, right? Conceptually, this makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you buy super in market shoppers really low in the funnel and make sure they convert with your brand? But if you don't go through the process of understanding, is that actually valuable? Does that work? Can I convince myself that what I'm going to bring to market is so uniquely valuable and I have proof that it works? If you don't do that, you're going to end up not driving the value and you're going to see basically a spike in sales because people like the concept. And then you're going to see a huge churn rate because people don't see the results. And then you're going to have to fight your way back from a branding perspective by revising your product and revising your measurement and trying to fix everything. And that's a bad place to be. So before you do anything, as you look at your business and think about a media product, start by thinking about the deterministic value that you can prove. And even if that is small, even if the thing that you can prove is maybe not as big as we could make billions or millions or whatever, it's better to start small with an incredibly high value proposition and scale than it is to not and to start with a half-baked product that you then have to fix. So once you start with value, it's important to be realistic about the TAM here, the total addressable market. A lot of people start this conversation with, oh my God, in automotive, there's $10 billion of advertising that goes towards display media. If we could get 2% or 1% of that spend, we would be making millions. That's rarely how it works, right? Because that doesn't give you a good platform to say, how are we going to achieve that? It's just an exciting proposition that gets everyone moving, which you need, but you need to be thinking from a bottom-up perspective with media. It's like, how do we launch products as a company? What is our actual sell-through rate? What do previous products we've launched look like? And what clients are going to buy this that we have confidence in? And what does a realistic picture of growth look like? Because when you're investing time and energy in building this and you're working off of this huge pie in the sky number, the chances of organizational drag when it doesn't blow up at you, it will kill the product. People will get unexcited, jaded, salespeople won't want to sell it, and it will die on the vine. So start with a really realistic growth projection and really think about, who could I sell this to first? How much money are they willing to spend? and how do I scale from there? So be realistic about the opportunity, because I'd rather, as an internal stakeholder, I would rather underpromise and overdeliver to my organization rather than tell a big story that I can't fulfill. And the last thing you should think about is planning and context, right? How a lot of people launch media products as its own. They're like, oh, well, we don't have this today. Let's launch this as its own separate revenue stream, and then we'll just make all this money we're not making today. Well, if you think about your customer, if they're already buying things from you and you want to sell them something else, it needs to work together. When you launch a media product and it doesn't work with the other things you're offering and you have a high wallet share from your customer, they're going to eventually go, well, hold on, I'm spending money here and here and here and here, and why am I giving you all this money? Like it doesn't make sense to do that. So plan it in context with your other product offerings and spend some time thinking about why would you buy this and media, and how do they work together, and how can I prove lift on both fronts, right? Because eventually your customers will ask that question. So before you get into any specifics, lead with the value, be realistic, and plan in context. And these are really important conversations to have internally. Once you've done that, start thinking about the components I talked about earlier: audience, activation, and measurement, right? You don't need all three of these. Any one of these done really well can be the backbone of a media product, but ideally you have a position on all three. And right, like all advertising activations are based on these three things. You need to target somebody, you need to serve them some media, and you need to see if it works, right? And that's foundational. There's nothing new about that. But it requires a lot more definition when you're going to market with a product, because you need to be able to be really specific about why each of these things are valuable, or which one of them is so valuable that you launched a product around it. So for audience, simple question: do you have audience data that is unique, timely, or difficult to acquire, right? Does someone show up on a digital property that you can retarget that other people don't have the same amount of information, right? From an automotive marketplace, it's like, look, I can see 30 million shoppers. The average automotive dealer can only see a few, and they can only see people shopping their inventory. So from an automotive perspective, a marketplace can say, look, we know a lot more about who's shopping where and when, and all the consumers you might be missing, and all the things about those consumers you might not know. And we can see leads in a way that you can't see. So do you have some version of a unique audience that some of your customers or stakeholders or partners can't see? That's a great place to start. And usually that's where these media networks start. Once you've answered that question, it comes down to activation. How are you going to execute the media? If you don't have audience, this becomes really important, because you need to think about, is there a way that I can advertise that is better than anything you can do on your own as my customer? Some things that you could think about are scalability. Do I have the ability to scale my advertising, either in the number of people I'm targeting or the way that I'm reaching people via multiple channels? Do I have a way to reach people and scale in a way that my end customer won't? Proprietary models. Do you do anything in your own marketing that is more sophisticated than your customer is going to be able to do because you have scale, right? There can be a lot of things. It can be custom optimization models. It can be data sets that are really interesting. It can be the way that your Google or Facebook or programmatic accounts are set up. But do you have some proprietary way of running media that is better than your customer is going to? Do you have automation? Do you have the ability to react faster, right, and drive better value? Or do you have access to inventory sources? Does your website have media that you could marry with offsite media and package that together? Do you have deals, or could you negotiate deals with other sites or other places? There are whole products like built around, hey, we have unique video inventory from Netflix and Hulu and Tubi, and you can't get that anywhere else. There's whole products built around that. So do you have inventory? And last, measurement, right? Do you have visibility into a outcome that other people can? Or so is someone buying something on your site, and can you see that whole shopping journey in a way that your customer doesn't? Or can you see, shopping data about that customer that your end customer won't see? Can you provide some sort of insight that's valuable and some KPI that is important to them in a way that they're not going to be able to see on their own? Like I said, any one of these is enough to build a product, but it's important to think about them. I will get into some specifics here. I'll try to breeze through these because they're text heavy and you can read them after the fact. But I spent a lot of time thinking about audience. So if audience is the thing you're thinking about and sort of grounding your media product on, here's a couple of things that I learned. The first one is don't buy a CDP. It's a huge thing in the industry. Everyone's talking about CDPs and how you need to implement them. The truth is that CDPs, only about 10% from a Forrester study are actually successful, right? And it's because people buy them thinking that somehow the CDP will create new data for them. It will give them ways that they didn't have before. The truth is a CDP is just a way to organize your data. It doesn't do anything for you. If you don't have organized data, it can be a good process to go through to implement one. But the truth is, there are practices you can go through yourself with your own data without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a platform. And usually the amount of effort to organize your data will be there no matter what. And then you have to organize it with the platform, which is duplicate work. So if you can, avoid buying a CDP unless you know really why you're buying it and the specific act of having a CDP, either from how you piped the data between places or where you store it or some other factor that's really important that you can't do yourself, then you can buy it. But I would advise, if you can avoid buying a CDP, avoid it. The other thing, if you're dealing with audiences, always assume you have less than you have. It's really easy to say, oh, we've got 10 million people coming to the site. We have a huge amount of audience. Well, when you start selling a media product, you have to start segmenting that audience. And you have to start sending it somewhere. So that audience might, you might have 10 million people, but when you send that data to Google or Facebook, you might only end up with 3 million that you can actually target. And then you have to take that 3 million and say, oh, well, I've got a customer that only wants to buy media in Chattanooga. Well, how many of that 3 million is in Chattanooga? And then again, using automotive as an example, right? If someone wants, oh, I only want Ford shoppers, right? Well, now all of a sudden you've got 30% of your actual audience targetable. You've only got a certain percent in Chattanooga, and then you've only got a certain percent of those who are shopping for a Ford. You may end up with less data than you have, or you think you have, and then you end up selling a product that you can't fulfill, and you need to start thinking about how do you make that up. So if you think you have a huge amount of audience, I would recommend being really rigorous about how you think about that. The other thing is, if you're using ad tags to capture audience and events, go server side, implement conversions APIs. It's really important. It's required in some cases. You're going to get a lot less data loss if you're doing a server side API integration than if you're using a tag. So work with your ad partners and make sure that you're thinking about that. And the last one is that email addresses don't necessarily equal targetable identity, right? If you think you have a ton of email addresses and you can use actual information that you think you have, the match rates to platforms on a single email address is going to be like 50%. Sometimes it may be 30. If you onboard a partner, you can get that to 70 or 80%. So if you're using PII, think about how to expand that, because it's not always what it seems like. So the overarching theme here is be pessimistic because you'll end up in a better place. I'd rather surprise myself with how well I can do rather than think I have something I don't. And then when you're designing the product, think about how your customers will segment your data and make sure you can fulfill that. And if you can't, onboard partners who can help you get there. So that could be a live ramp, that can be buying flat files from like an Infutor, that could be working with Experian or TransUnion or S&P. There are a lot of ways to expand your data in a way that's really valuable to your customer, but think about that ahead of time rather than having to add it in later. So once you've got your audience figured out, the next thing you need to do is figure out where you're going to activate it. There's lots of partners out there. I would encourage the two criteria of that being, is this a partner that I'm close with, that I can really develop a deep partnership with and maybe do some cool stuff that not everybody can do? And is this a platform that will drive the value that I'm looking for, right? Facebook is going to do something different than Google is going to do. TikTok is not going to work to generate leads. Programmatic is going to be great for awareness, like the Trade Desk. It might not be so great at conversion, right? You might not get actual conversions out of programmatic the same way that you would out of Google or Facebook. Amazon is another great one. I think the Amazon DSP is super powerful, but it's kind of hard to use. And so if you have the ability to work with Amazon and offer that type of advertising to your customer, that's going to really be attractive to them, because they don't have a way to do that, because they don't have a team that knows how to do it. So pick a platform that's attractive, that you have a good partnership with, and that meets the KPI of your end user. Some other things to think about when you're selecting platforms or working with the platforms, see if there's a way you can get access to something unique, right? If you have a really deep relationship with Facebook, see if there's a beta that no one else has access to. See if they're willing to, an example of this is I have worked with Trade Desk in the past to develop like custom audience models or custom optimization algorithms, right? That we can offer as a co-branded thing. You need a lot of scale to do that, but see if there's a way that you can pick a partner that is willing to meet you halfway and do something cool to offer something unique to the market, right? The other one is really be proactive about understanding measurement based on the platform you're using. As an example, Facebook, kind of a black box, very powerful, great at getting high volumes of things. Generally, quality can be lower. And their measurement is really just what ad drove what KPI. They don't give you log level data. They don't give you user journeys. They don't give you really good information about ad exposure, right? So, but they're really, really good at driving conversion. So Facebook is an important platform. But if your users are going to require, your customers are going to require really deep measurement, you might want to think about who's going to give that to you. Because again, value is the biggest churn driver. If you're working with programmatic, again, see if you can get access to inventory. Like I said, there's whole products built around having unique access to inventory. So see if you can negotiate something like that. And like the Amazon example, leverage barriers to entry. What can you do because you have scale that your customers can't do? Because access can be, again, the whole backbone of a product. So just some things to think about as you're vetting partners and vetting platforms to launch on. And hopefully you pick one that you can do one or a few of these things with. Measurement is an entire presentation. Every measurement execution is going to be different. So I don't have time to get into that here. If you have questions specifically about measuring things, my background is in data and sort of data strategy. So if you do have questions, I'll be sharing my email address after this. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk more about how you can measure specifically. But if you're looking for some frameworks, IAB, or the Interactive Advertising Bureau, has really good guidelines published for retail media that you can use to sort of mirror some of these executions. And they're public. Just search IAB measurement guidelines. You'll find it. It's a great tool. I've used it. And I find that if I'm adhering to those things, it's a best practice, right? It's going to work well. So that's a good resource. Generally, the measurement things you're going to need to provide details on ad exposure, reach, frequency, user journeys, if you can get there, conversion data, who's actually completing the KPI, and then if you can, getting down to really transparent views on the value you're driving. If you can get to a dollar figure, even if it's modeled, if you can get to some idea of the quality, if you can get the deepest you can get and the most transparent you can be, people value transparency in products. So think about transparency and value as part of your measurement and see how deep you can get. Reach out if you have questions. I'll breeze through this section. It may be bigger than some are able to achieve. This is an enterprise model of how you would construct this project. The big takeaway here, you say you've got your audience, you got your platform, you've got your measurement strategy, you know what this thing's going to look like, and now you need to get it done. The biggest comment here, somebody needs to be the owner. One person needs to be fully accountable for executing this project, right? If you have this bunch of people from revenue and from product and marketing all talking about it, and there's not ownership, it's going to fail. You need a single point of management, and that person really needs to be dedicated to doing this because execution is everything, right? Even though you have one person, that person can't exist in a silo, right? If revenue is driving this and going to one person and saying, build it, that person's going to have to go to tech and finance and marketing and get stakeholders together. And if they're not at the table, your tech team, if there's any development you need to do, they'll look at this and go, why are we doing this? I don't really care about this. I got a million priorities. I'm not going to devote resources. And it could take you literally years to develop a product if they're not bought in. Finance and pricing is incredibly important. Getting those people at the table, thinking about how you're going to price it, thinking about the growth model, thinking about impact to revenue, having a P&L for the product, really important. Marketing, you need to get your best practices on ad execution from your marketing team, right? They're going to know more than any other team. They need to be stakeholders at the beginning, and then you're going to need product marketing and go-to-market at the end. So before you even launch into project planning, get in a room with every stakeholder you can and invest the time in getting them bought in. Everybody on this chart should be excited to do this. And I would say if they're not, spend the time to get them there, even if it feels like it takes forever. Having multiple stakeholders championing the initiative is really important. And then, having each of those people assign owners within their teams, with product, with tech, with finance, analytics, you're going to need measurement support, marketing, revenue. You need a lead from each team who is accountable for their piece of the puzzle. Because if you don't have that, you're going to get sloppy. It's not going to go well. Again, this is an enterprise model. You might not have all these people, but try to map this to your own org. But the overarching principle is you need a single owner, you need buy-in across the organization, and you need vertical owners of each part of this process. This is a sample project plan. Feel free to review it. The high-level takeaway is just really make sure you know when people need to be involved and set the expectation that they have a role to play at that time. So product design is going to require a different amount of investment from every team. Actually building the product will mostly be on product and tech and analytics. I would always recommend doing a pilot, whether it's a client paid or a self-paid pilot, just to test this out. I would never launch a product that I haven't tested. And then from that test, there's going to be revisions. And then once you've kind of got the product in a good place where your pilot customers are happy, then I would launch it and monitor it. And so make sure you're thinking about each of these stages proactively and assigning owners and scoping out what that work is going to look like. The biggest piece that I think is important is building these products for scale, right? If you haven't thought about how to support this product long-term, you could have the best product in the world, and if you don't have the right support for it, it's not going to succeed. You're going to run into errors, you're going to run into all sorts of things as the product grows, and if you can't support it in a really easy to manage way, the organizational burden of managing the product will feel higher than the revenue that you're generating. Walmart's a classic example. They partnered with Trade Desk. They tried to build like a white labeled Walmart ad platform. They spent years and millions, if not like close to $1 billion developing this thing. And the number of self-service customers that are actually using their platform, it's the smallest part of their revenue mix. So make sure you, and it's hard to support. They're maintaining APIs, they're maintaining a tech infrastructure. They don't have the team to do it. Trade Desk is not supporting them doing it. Nothing against Trade Desk, it's just not their business. And so like, how do you support and manage this from a people or a systems perspective is really what will make or break the product in month 6, month 12, month 18 as you scale it. So there's kind of two operating models when you're thinking about launching this. One is a staff-supported model, right? You're just going to hire and staff a team. You're going to bring in media specialists who manage media really well and work in the ad platforms and launch and manage campaigns themselves, generate the reporting themselves, and you've got a team dedicated to this. The pros of doing that is that it's cheaper to do upfront, right? You just grab a media specialist somewhere for whatever their going rate is, you toss them at the product, and you just hire more people as you scale. It's a low upfront cost. It's a pretty fast launch because you got hands-on keyboards, and it's a familiar team structure. People know how to manage a team of specialists. Organizations are usually pretty good at this. There are a lot of cons to doing it that way. I can't tell you the number of products that I've come into to fix. And the core problem is that you have this team sitting off to the side of the organization. Nobody talks to them. They're under a huge amount of stress, and they're just constantly fixing issues and launching campaigns. And I've had to come in and fix those products a lot because they don't work very efficiently. So the cons of that are costs scale with growth, right? The more you grow, the more you need to hire, the more you need to invest, the bigger team you have. That erodes margins in a pretty significant way. Longer launch times to realize revenue. You have a campaign launch, you have a client sign up, and now the customer success team needs to enter an order into their platform, and that order needs to get sent to the media team, and then the media team has questions because the form wasn't complete. You could spend up to 3 or 4 weeks realizing contracted revenue, and that compounds over time, and that really kills the profitability of the product. So it can, these systems, people-based systems, can create longer launch times, longer times to realize revenue, and it can really hurt. You need to train these people, right, on the product. If you're onboarding new team members, people aren't going to be efficient until month 2 or 3. So that creates issues. You have a risk of turnover if you have these siloed teams working on the side, and then somebody leaves who built the product. Now you have a bunch of people who don't actually know all the things that person knows because the process is up here, right? And that can really hurt organizations. I've been through this, where you have a product that essentially one person knows everything. They've got 3 specialists that don't really know anything, but they're just doing work. The person in charge leaves, the specialist can't support the product, and things start getting messy, churn starts increasing, and all of a sudden you need to send somebody in to fix that, right? And that can be really costly. Obviously, manual errors I mentioned. And then the other thing is, when you're doing a team, say you're launching something with Facebook advertising and you want to add Google to that to get more channels in the mix, what you're going to run into is you need another team. The people who work in Facebook don't know how to work in Google. And so if you want to expand your product offering from a single point and start to grow into more of a media network model, you're going to need to expand the team and basically duplicate your team structure. So it's totally doable. There are companies that do this way. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just have had bad experiences with this. So I would encourage you to be cautious about using the low upfront investment and sort of the speed to market as a justification for going this way, because down the road, it might be more painful. The other option is more of an automated model. Building around automation, building around a platform, if you can, to manage and report on your campaigns. This has maybe more pain up front, but often has huge dividends later on. And I'll talk about that. So the good news about launching automated products is that they're very low maintenance. They're very scalable, right? Because they're just connected and they're just running things. So you get an order, the platform sees it, it launches it, and it just starts managing it based on rules that you've set. Your time to live could be a day or less, right? It could be immediate. The error rate is minimal because you've set up all your rules ahead of time. You know how to manage things. You could have automated pacing of budgets. You could have automated optimizations between channels or within the channel, weighting different creatives or different media types to achieve the best outcome. And you're not going to see as many errors. It's expandable without support, right? If you've automated a Facebook product and then you want to launch Google, you can just build an extra automation that says, hey, look at how I did things in Facebook, mirror that in Google, or do whatever the complementary activity is in Google, and then you're building additional tech. And the good news about this is also it's a capital expense, right? You're building a platform that is yours and it's proprietary, and you get to own all of the tech behind it. And that can be really valuable as an asset, not just for your own team managing the product, but then you might start to say, well, hold on, if we could do this for Facebook for a product, couldn't we do this for Facebook for our corporate marketing? And you could start to see some cross benefits with something like in-housing media from an agency, right? So there's a lot of benefits. There are costs, right? There are cons. It does require a heavier upfront investment, and the buy-in on getting the money to build a product from a tech perspective, it's a bigger conversation organizationally, and it might be difficult. But I would argue it's worth it, but it is a little more barrier to entry. It requires some patience, right? If you're building something, you're going to have a lead time. It might be 2 months, it might be 5 months, but you're not going to realize that revenue immediately, and people are going to look at the bills coming in and go, well, hold on, where are we getting the ROI from this? So there is some upfront patience, some upfront investment, and it's usually not familiar. People aren't really used to often launching a completely automated system, and that can be scary. But it has huge benefits. The way that an automated system can work is kind of what I described, right? This is the concept, is that you take all of your enterprise architecture, your CRM, any reporting or data that you have, any ad tech that you have, and what you do to build something like that is you build capabilities in between what you have in the enterprise and what you have in the ad platforms to templatize what you're doing, to plan your media, to create campaign templates. Usually these platforms have some sort of self-service interface that your team can use or one person can use. You can create things in bulk and auto-optimize your campaigns. So the build is really this middleware between your ad platforms and your system. The easiest way to describe how this would work is what I said before. You get an order in your CRM, you get someone to launch something like this. The order comes through, your automation grabs that order out of Salesforce, figures out the parameters based on the order, and just automatically pipes that into whatever ad platform you're using. And you don't have to have a person touch it ever. It can be very streamlined. And so asking yourself, do I have this middleware? Do I have anything organizationally that looks like this that I can use? Do I have a team that knows how to do this that I can leverage? Do my developers, does my product team, do I have any MarTech people? Do I have a team that can do this? And start from that place, or start to map out your workflows that exist today. If you already have a media product, right, and you're thinking about how to make it better, this is often the path to go down. And I've done this a number of times, where you say, okay, well, let's just map out all the things that people are doing and ask ourselves, well, how can a robot do this? And usually you end up simplifying the workflow as a result. So it can be a good exercise to go through. And it has huge margin implications, right? This is based on aggregated data that we have and that I have from my own experience. And what this does is it maps out the gross monthly profit that you're making from scaling a media product. And this is just assuming linear growth, that you get like 10 customers a month, right? That's not always how it's going to work. It's not going to look like this, but it's an easy model to model out, right? So it assumes linear growth, and on the left-hand side, it assumes that you have a manual team managing this product. And you can see in the monthly operating cost, and again, gross monthly profit would be revenue coming after the cost of media, right? So you have a gross monthly profit, it's growing in a linear way, and then you have your monthly operating cost, which is people-based, often on the left-hand side. And what you end up with after month 18, say you've invested a little bit of time up front in the first couple of months building the product, that has a cost. And then after it's built, you're just scaling people. What you're going to end up with after 18 months is probably about a 16% profit margin. I've seen everywhere from 12 to 20. It's not bad, but it's closer to an agency model. And then you end up, when churn hits or when things get difficult, right, that margin might shrink. It could get down to like 10% if it's not operating efficiently or people aren't scaling. And then you really start to get a lot of scrutiny from the organization to say, is this worth it, right? From the automated perspective, you can see that upfront investment, but the beauty of the automated model is that you don't have to scale after it's built, right? And so you have this bigger upfront investment as you're growing the product, but then once you've built the whole thing and you get out of the pilot phase and get into starting to scale this thing, your costs really don't grow. I have an example in a minute of a product that is completely automated, right? There's no headcount. And at the end of that 18-month, even with that heavier upfront investment, you could end up with close to a 30% profit margin. I've seen things as closer to 50 or 60, depending on the media that you're running. So when I've seen manually supported, what I usually see is 12 to 20% margin, which is fine, but it's not great. With an automated model, you could see anywhere from 25 to 50% margin. And then as this grows, right, as you continue to scale that blue line, your margin continues to increase because you're not growing cost. So there are real implications to doing this in an automated way versus a manual way. And often when I come into fixed media products, I'm having to automate it, right? That ends up being the solution. And as you fix your media products, as you grow your media product base, you may have limited upfront investments to scale it, but your profit margin will generally stay much higher in an automated model. Some examples of people that have done this. I'll blow through these. These are eye charts, I know. You can read these after the fact, but this one is Rent, which is now which has since been bought. But Rent.com had an extensive amount of rental market data, right? They're starting with their audience. They have great media executions, but they don't really know how to connect the two in a way that their clients, which would be apartment owners or building owners, who would want to buy this product to say, hey, I want to get more renters, right? Rent has the data. They have the media platforms. They just don't know how to launch this at scale. This is a chassis case study. So we built two simple to use and simple to sell products that activate at scale and connect with in-market renters. And we built the first MVP in about 3 months and generated about 6 million in revenue within the first year, which is huge, right? That's material to any P&L, right? The second MVP was also finished in 3 months. And the thing that I know about this is there is no staff support. This is a completely automated revenue stream with almost no overhead. It goes straight from sale to activation. The reporting is automated. Nobody touches it. This is just an automated moneymaker. So this is a great case study. It is totally possible. If you start thinking about automation before launch, this is where you can get to. Another case study is a automotive marketplace, which will not be named, but the marketplace had a similar thing. They had a bunch of first-party data on automotive shoppers, and they wanted to offer an omni-channel, so across social, across search, across display. They wanted to bring that audience to bear to generate more leads for their automotive dealerships. But they tried to develop this in-house. It had taken years. It was not efficient. It was not going at the pace it needed to do. The platforms that we had built were not particularly good and didn't do what we needed them to do. So using Chassis, the marketplace was able to bring all their channel executions together, bring all the media products together in a fully automated platform that's integrated with the CRM. They launched an MVP, and it created an entirely new revenue stream that's managed by one person. And this is millions of dollars in revenue managed by one person. So it's highly efficient, very valuable. The proof is there, and it's managed at scale. So these are two great case studies, and you can do this too if you think in the way that I described earlier. So to wrap this up, I know we're coming up on Q&A here. Just to wrap this up, if you're thinking about launching a media product, ground your strategy in value, keep your stakeholders close, and make sure you're architecting for profitability and scale. And you can capitalize on this opportunity and create an entirely new revenue stream for the business that is scalable, easy to manage, and lucrative, while still being very valuable to your customer. So I know I blew through a lot of that. That was a ton of content, but hopefully you got something out of it. And I definitely want to move in the last 10 minutes here to Q&A. So Veronica, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much. That was very helpful in sort of plotting all of this in terms of identifying the opportunity, assessing the opportunity, and most importantly, what are some of the best practices in actual implementation and what to look for. So super, super helpful, insightful. I think each one of those three sections can be their own spin-off webinar. So for those who've joined, potentially we'll have more of these as part of a series. But we will open it up to questions on the chat. So you can ask a question in the Q&A section. And while you're doing that, I do want to invite our CEO and co-founder, Veronica Buitron. She's also the product owner of Chassis, and she has over 2 decades of experience developing highly innovative MarTech solutions, and pretty much kind of lives on the intersection of marketing and automation, and has been a pioneer in that area. So Veronica, I'd like to invite you in as well, and perhaps we'll kick off with some questions. Again, I'm monitoring any Q&A that's being added, and then if not, we'll ask some of our own.
Awesome. Thank you, Bharat, for the intro. Thank you so much, Alex, for this. Basically, it was a great presentation. Even myself, find myself writing notes here, so that had been really great. And if basically I was in the audience, what I will be wanted to understand, you laid out really great tactical advice, which I think is awesome, because many times we don't see actual tactical things that you can do. There is definitely a great opportunity for companies to seize on this. What type of scale would I need to have if I was, looking to take advantage of this?
Sorry, I got muted. It depends on your value proposition, right? If you're going off of audience, you do need a lot of scale. It depends on your customer too. I mean, if you're a local business, or if you're targeting local customers, you could get away with less scale. If you don't have, I mean, I laid out this big enterprise vision of this, right? And that's, the most extreme example. But if you're an agency, if you're a smaller business, you still have the opportunity to do this, but the partnership aspect becomes a lot more important, because if your skill is really in the media or in the measurement, you need to go out and find partners that can add the other pieces. So I guess as you're looking at the process that I laid out, like anybody can use these these thoughts, right, to make their media better that they're offering, or to package their media differently to clients. But as you're going through audience activation and measurement, the key is, when you're building it, think about which one you're strong in. And if you don't have the scale in the other places, look for partners that you can work with. Because if you're partnering on the audience side with like an Oracle or an S&P, right, their whole goal is to get their audience out there, and they will do unique and interesting things with you if you can, you know, bring your side of activation or measurement or whatever to the table. So it's just about evaluating where you're strong, evaluating where you need help, and partnering with people where necessary. But anybody can take the thought process and apply it to their business, I think.
Awesome. That means that basically not having this huge first-party data does not, you know, impair me or preclude me to really take advantage of all the things that you have been laying out here.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, and there are plenty of agencies too that have built their own proprietary data off of these partnerships, right? You look at Epsilon as a company, right? It's partially based on advertising data and partially based on partnerships, from what I understand. But they're a great partner, and they work great with agency executions on that group. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for first party data.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think we don't have a ton of time for questions, but one question that is always close to my heart, as I'm always, you know, helping companies really achieve the ROI of their investments. So when you think about tackling these type of projects, right? And really with the aim of really taking advantage of the opportunity and getting, you know, the ROI, it's not like doing it because it's cool to do it, but doing it because you really are going after business objective. So what could be things, red flags, or things that I should be looking at to know when to correct action, when to seek out help, when to know when things are not necessarily going exactly with my, you know, my first intentions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can happen anywhere in the process. The two biggest things that I have experienced is, one, on the execution side, right? If you're trying to build something in-house, I wish I could say that I'd seen an incredible in-house like automation build, or like building this from scratch yourself. I haven't. I know it happens, but I've never seen that go particularly well. Because often companies don't have MarTech engineers. Like, there's just not an internal resource. It's like, oh yeah, I've spent 10 years working in the Google API. I know exactly how to do this. And so what I'd look for is, if you have this product, you go through all your planning, you get the idea in a couple of months or a month, and you're really excited, and then you hand it off to another team to build something, and then all of a sudden you're just in this like prioritization hell, right? And your project starts dragging. I would say, the minute your tech team, if you're building something, starts to push timelines back, if that happens more than once or twice, where you start getting things from them and you look at them and go, that's not what I wanted, really start thinking about the amount of internal money you're spending and time you're spending, and say, if I don't have the skill set to build this, it's going to be cheaper and easier to partner or to get some help or consulting or something like that, because it causes a lot of problems. And then on the execution side, right? Like, if you're growing and you find that you're running into a ton of issues with a manual setup, you're going to see it show up in churn. You're going to see your profit margins tanking. You're going to see your growth slowing. So that would be a moment where, if you really believe in the concept, you really believe that people find value, but you're just not able to like pull it off at scale, that's another place where I've had to come in and remediate a lot of products.
Awesome. Which is basically a take of like an audience question, which it is into the buy versus build in the automation. I think it is like piggybacking on your answer. Is there anything that you would be adding on the how to think about the buy versus build?
Yeah, I mean, there's both can work, right? But it's hopefully what you've seen from all of my content here is like, be realistic about what you can do. I mean, a lot of organizations, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh yeah, we could do that. You know, oh yeah, that's not that hard. But then all of a sudden, 6 months later, and you're like, oh, well, I've got half a developer, or like one kind of unskilled team scrambling to get this done. So like, try to be, as an organization, try to be honest about what you can do, right? Like there's no harm. And I think there's a lot of pride involved in that. Like, oh, we should be able to do this. Well, if you get pride out of the way for a second, just be honest about it. Like if you don't have the internal skill sets, or if you do have the internal skill sets, make sure you're really devoting those to this project, right? And that can work. But if you don't have the internal skill sets, or you have too much going on, like I showed, even if you invest a heavy amount up front, by the end of year one, you're going to be profitable. So I think it's really about being honest about what you can do and your internal skill sets, and being willing to model out the growth and be honest about where you think you could get to if you did this well, and what the upfront investment cost is, and try to think in the long term, not the short term. I have personally usually partnered to do something like this. There's a lot of platforms out there. The other thing I would consider is customization. I know we're at time. The last thing I'll say is, like, there are out-of-the-box platforms you can buy. You often have to, so say you say, okay, well, we'll just buy a platform, right? And we'll just run it all out of there. The problem with a lot of those platforms is they have no incentive to customize anything for you, right? If they're a scaled automation platform, they don't want to be spending the time tailoring their implementation to your business, right? So if I am buying something, my operating principles are usually, can it be tailored to my use case in a way that's really specific and valuable? And then if possible, can I own some of the tech, right? The best thing about building is you get to own it. The bad thing about building is you have to maintain it. And so as you look at partners, I would be asking, like, is this custom to my use case? Do I get to own some of this infrastructure? Will you maintain this for me so I don't have to devote 2 or 3 developers to maintaining all these APIs for, the next years, right? Because that's a hidden cost that's really can be quite large. So those are some of the things that I would think about. Be honest about what you can do. Think about the overhead of maintaining something yourself. And if you're buying a platform, don't buy something that the change of adding it is going to be more costly than just doing it yourself. Buy something that's customizable.
Something in the middle. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for all of those insights. Really appreciate it. Veronica, thank you for the questions. And all the attendees, again, as we mentioned earlier, we will be sharing a copy of these slides and this webinar link with you. We really appreciated your participation and the questions that you brought up. And again, if you find yourself working on any type of projects that are related to this, or any other questions regarding automation and digital marketing intersection, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact's available, and we will be sending an email. But thank you again, Alex, and hopefully we will see each other on next webinar together.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.